agritourism bed and breakfasts. And they have very specific regulations about how they are run, how the owner has to be there, how that it's a much more kind of, I'll call it a supervised temporary housing. And then we have occasional short-term rentals, which I don't see a definition for, and commercial short-term rentals. And in looking at the regulations for the commercial short-term rentals, what I take from that is that is clearly, that could be construed, the way I've read it, as an opportunity for someone to come into Chatham to buy a property with the specific intent of turning it into essentially a full-time rental. Not exactly a hotel, but basically they can advertise it, they can rent it frequently. There are permitting issues, there are regulations, but my concern is that, especially in certain areas of the town, that we would have essentially a residence, a house, which then becomes frequently rented, and if it were on my road, I would have a problem. I wouldn't know my neighbors. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Bob Linville.
Good evening all. I'm Bob Linville. Person doesn't know how to spell my name. And I live in Old Chatham on Route 13. I would pick up on some of the comments we've heard earlier. First, as to the legislative process that you're following of giving us on the web 13 days ago a final text of the comprehensive plan. And I side with Mitch Ostrola in saying that it's really impossible to analyze it in such a short period of time and make pertinent comments tonight. I had legislative experience in Albany. I was on the ZIC myself for a number of years. I would say to you that the process followed in the Assembly and the Senate with new statutes, new laws, is to place the old law side by side with the new provision, or insert the new provision with X outs in the old law to show exactly a reader how there is a change to be made. And of course, hold it if you would. New material, of course, has nothing to compare with, and it stands alone. But the analysis by the town residents of this new zoning law is impossible with the text that you presented us with. Absolutely impossible. There's no cogent analysis possible for 182 pages in the absence of a comparison with what went on before. I'm not going to get into nitpicking or micro issues here. There are many of them that need to have careful thought as to whether or not they're appropriate in this town. I had the strong feeling as I tried to read 182 pages or so that much of this was a graft from another town, and just in bulk, in big chunks from other places that are not like Chatham, as though there's a template for a zoning law which got cannibalized for us. And I think that ignores the uniqueness of our town and tries to stuff us into a mold where we don't belong, a mold of some other place than Chatham. Now, I would say also, and I won't belabor this, that my sense in reading it is that it ignores all the residents of the town in large measure. It's a play to specific groups within the town. It is almost as though Chatham is becoming a plaything or a toy for people from far away. And that ignores the residents of the town, which I have great opposition to. So I recommend that the legislative process that's time-honored in the state be followed here with comparison of text and more time, as Mitch asks, for careful deliberation of the changes that you apparently have already voted to promote. Thank you.
Dan Collins?
Who? Me?
Janelle, excuse me.
Denal Collins, beef farmer, 108 River Road, Chatham. At the end of the CPIG meetings, there was a strong push from a small group of people about basing zoning on the surface of the roads. And I just wanted to reiterate that the comprehensive plan directs you to steer zoning towards your poorer soils, which are irrespective of road surfaces and even zoning district for that matter. Also, I wanted to talk about the use tables. Anything not listed is prohibited. There are new enterprises being born every day, and prohibited is very strong language, I believe, to say if it's not listed as prohibited. As far as what Randy said, I'm sorry for being redundant, but ancillary incomes in some of these zoning districts, if I have a skill set but I live in RL2, if I can do something in my garage to support my family, I have to start going through hoops of special use permits and making it more cost prohibitive to get that intermediate home occupation. It might deter me from doing it and providing extra income. A small comment on the noise ordinance. I haven't read the most recent one, but it seems quite draconian. And just another comment on what I heard earlier about the appeal of rising real estate, rising property values. I don't believe that should be the ethos of this town. We're a diverse community that the comprehensive plan celebrates a traditional rural lifestyle, not polishing it to make it most appealing for the real estate market. And actually, if you look in the appendices of the comprehensive plan, we have the SWOT acronyms: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the influence of real estate agents is actually listed as a threat in the housing subsection by the comprehensive plan. That's all I have to say. I'd like to thank Randy for her work and other members of the committee, Dan. And that's it. Bob, you too. But let's maintain a traditional rural lifestyle. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Ziskin, Z-I-S-K-I-N-D. I live in Chatham, and I've lived here since 2000. But I was born and raised on a chicken farm in rural New Jersey, so I do understand farming communities and rural communities. I want to thank the board, the people who developed the comprehensive plan. I was so impressed when I found out. I moved to a community that had the development of a comprehensive plan that interviewed people in the town and took into account residents' input. It was a multi-year process, and it was kind of amazing to understand the work that went into it and the work that's gone into creating zoning laws out of the comprehensive plan. So for that, I thank everyone involved and feel lucky to live in a place where that happened. What I want to talk about is also the short-term rental issue. And I understand peer-to-peer economy has opened up a lot of opportunities for people one-on-one to create businesses, and it is a way to bring more income into families, and I think that's just great. Unfortunately, it also creates a new set of issues because nobody's encountered these things before, and nobody knows what the laws around them should be and how they can adversely affect communities and what you can do to make it fair to both the people operating these things and the communities in which they're situated. Fortunately, we're not the only community in the country, or for that matter in the world, that this is happening in. It's happening all over the world, and there are people who have studied it all over the world, in cities, in small rural communities everywhere. There's a man called David Waxmuth. He's an assistant professor at McGill University School of Urban Planning. He studied Airbnb rental practices around the world in cities and communities throughout the United States and Europe. And he has found that there's two big issues. One is taxes. You know, it's a off-the-books kind of economy thing. And the other is the impact to the community. Is it going to be a short-term rental that's done in the spirit of a B&B, where you rent out a room occasionally to people? Or is it someplace that somebody buys for simply revenue generating purposes, doesn't live there, doesn't even live in the community and rents it out? In fact, in Boston today, more than 70% of the Airbnb listings are operated by outside professional companies who buy apartments and homes and list them on the Airbnb market. What Locksmith discovered was that Airbnb has been happy to cooperate with regulators about collecting taxes in order to level the playing field with hotels and other service businesses like that. But they'll resist attempts, until recently, have resisted attempts to restrict how much activity is allowed. Which means that many places where short-term rentals are illegal, guests are instructed to lie and say they're friends of the landlord. And herein lies the problem. Short-term, whole home Airbnb rentals, where the owner doesn't live on the property or even in the area, are an entirely different proposition than subletting one's home for months or years at a time. It's different than inns, motels, and hotels, because they all have the protected presence of staff and bed and breakfasts. And many Airbnb rentals have owners present. But that's not the case with whole home short-term rentals. Whole home Airbnb rentals find groups of strangers showing up weekly or even daily, which often brings a high possibility of noise, disturbance, quality of life issues, and even security issues. And for the properties that offer short-term whole home rentals full-time, the probability of issues arising becomes even higher. I encourage the town board and the zoning committee of Chatham to preserve the intent of residential and rural area zoning and take steps to regulate Airbnb or any short-term rental through methods. And again, there are best practices that other communities have done, such as requiring hosts to register with the town to determine if they are operating in prohibited areas. Other communities have done this, and Airbnb is actually working with these communities to identify illegal listings. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hillary Corson?
Hillary Corson. I have a diversified farm in Old Chatham, and I also didn't get to read the whole thing and would very much welcome the side-by-side document. The main things, I was mostly focused on the agricultural components, and I was surprised, first of all, Beth Ann laughs at how often I'm in the town hall for the various permits we're already pursuing. And I guess I was surprised that there's no mention of scale when it comes to agritourism and other on-farm or other events that people might be having. It seems like a waste of everyone's time and resources potentially for low-income events to have to go through some of these processes, including things like the day camp. We had a farm camp and it was going to generate $5,000 and we have to go through the 45-day process, and I don't know, it just seems like it could be a poor use of resources. And I was happy to see the 45-day process articulated. I don't know if that's new, but in terms of being able to pursue the modified site plan reviews, that felt at the upper end, that felt reasonable, but I wouldn't want it to be any longer than that. And if processes like putting in a farm pond could be expedited in some way, I think that would be appreciated. That's all I have for now. Thank you all for the work you're doing.
Thanks. Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Euler. I'm a resident of Old Chatham. I have 3 daughters in the Chatham School District, and I grew up in North Chatham, so I'm pretty much a lifelong resident. I'd like to thank you for all the hard work you've done in preserving the rights of farmers and our farm lands and this agricultural community that I hope to pass down to my own children eventually. So that's very important. I want to address the large commercial residential, the large commercial use of residential properties. I don't really think the issue, as some people have stated, is just renting a room in your home. I think the issue is whole homes with absentee owners that are coming in and renting out homes, for, a minimum of 3-day blocks for, $500+ a night. These people aren't here more than, a few times a year, and they're clearly making money off it. Also, these people tend to have more than one residence that they're doing this with. Myself, I have one residence. So, it means a lot to me that I know my neighbors and that there isn't that transient population with party buses of 20+ people coming in and, out of my street and going into my driveway at 10 p.m. and asking if, and unpacking and asking if they arrived. And I think that there's got to be some kind of restriction placed on this type of activity. So thank you very much.
I think this says Adele Bruno.
Adele Bueno, B-U-E-N-O. I'm one of those bad guys that have been renting Airbnb. And not only Airbnb, also VRBO, that's vacation home rented by owners. That's been in the market for more than 20 years. I came to Chatham, but I came to Chatham to visit someone, and I completely fell in love. I came in August. In December, I came and bought a house because I wanted to retire here. I just love the whole community. I employ 3 people to take care of my home. I do have a staff that stay 24 hours taking care of the home when I have guests. I do rent a house. 59% of the people that I rent is people that left Chatham and came back to visit families. Holidays is always rented for families of people that live here to come back and cook their Thanksgiving, their Christmas. We're not the bad people. I really want to move here, but if I get, unfortunately, I have grandchildren. And we made a goal that we are not moving here until our granddaughter goes to kindergarten. That's going to be in the next 4 years. But my house is taken care wonderfully. The grounds, the house, and I only rent for families. We should not be penalized because we cannot live in a house. I do come for summers. I spend the whole summer here, and I do rent a house most times in the winter. I think you guys all should see the other side, the people that I did not come here to be labeled a bad person. I came here to have a home, to take care of my home, but unfortunately I cannot afford just keep the home sitting down until I can move. Now, regulations from the town would be fantastic and welcome. That's all I have to say.
My name is Jean Brody, and I've lived in Chatham for about, 45 years or so. And I was on the original plan committee, and I'm so glad everybody's here because I can't tell you the number of times we've sat at a meeting and said, we have to discuss this and that and the other thing, and we have our ideas, but what about the other people? How many times did I say that, Bob? And but I'm just glad I've been listening to the comments here, and in my reading of the plan and the comments I've read in the minutes and in the paper, and I think we've had some excellent ideas. I think some of the ideas that we have, well, for instance, when we started the plan and nobody knew whether it was an Airbnb. So that's the, you had to ask those things as we've gone along. I agree that we need a little bit more time to contemplate and digest and weave in some of the ideas we've heard tonight along with what we're hearing from other people. So I just thank everybody for their ideas and for coming.
Stockman?
Hello, how are you? Scott Stockman, S-C-O-T-T-S-T-O-C-K-M-A-N. I actually live in the town of Stuyvesant, but I'm a property owner in the village. And this whole thing is kind of new to me, unfortunately, but I wanted to point out a couple of things quickly. One was the point that Mitch made about, iterations of the plan and putting the onus of trying to determine what has changed from one iteration to the other. Putting that onus on the public is kind of a bit of a tough thing. It would be much better if, Microsoft Word has a little button that says track changes on it, of which the comments are made. You can see exactly how a document was changed. Having that document available to the public would be very helpful to the public. Or at least a memo of the changes, between one iteration to the next would be very helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention was Wendy brought up, the point that a bunch of prohibited uses were added in one of these iterations. And looking at, if what she has here is correct, which I'm assuming that it is because she's a very intelligent woman, some of these uses don't seem very intensive. And the town itself has a planning board, which ideally, if you have faith in your planning board, they should be able to take an individual project, be able to evaluate it on its individual needs and on an individual basis, and be able to determine, based on the comprehensive plan and the zoning that you have, whether it is accepted use or not. And they could pass it or not pass it. So, as a taxpayer in the town, my fear is that spot zoning like this and adding these prohibited uses, as Mitch pointed out, is going to invite lawsuits, which in turn invite lawyers to charge the town a lot of money, which in turn invites the town to raise my taxes. So, those are the two things I wanted to mention. I appreciate your time. I thank you for listening.
Elizabeth Marks.
Hi, everybody. It's Elizabeth Marks, M-A-R-K-S. I'm a resident of Chatham. I just really appreciate everyone's work, and I know everyone in this room really just wants to preserve the rural character of Chatham, and I don't have all the answers, but I appreciate people working on it. We have a property tax crisis in New York, and it is really hard to make a full-time living in Columbia County. My property taxes alone are 13% of my gross income, not my adjusted gross, but my gross. It's probably worse for adjusted gross. And Airbnb has been a godsend to me. It is the sole reason I've been able to keep my home. I mean, there are some people in this room who have sat with me when I sobbed when I first got my first property tax bill because I didn't know how I was going to pay it. And I believe that Airbnb and VRBO has been a tremendous economic boon to this town. I've just been shocked at how many people have come who come to my Airbnb who just want to hang out here. And they're spending money, and they're keeping the restaurants and businesses that I can't always afford to shop in, but I'm glad that they're here. They're keeping them in business. So I'm very opposed to all the regulations. I mean, in truth, they're probably just going to be an annoyance for me. I can continue to operate because I can fall within that, but I'm against them because, one, I think they're restricting business in the town. And two, I really feel like as long as I'm complying with health codes, as long as I'm complying with disturbance laws, and I read the disturbance laws, they're pretty specific, they're pretty measurable. They apply to short-term rentals, long-term rentals, residents, and part-time second homeowners. But don't tell me how to, that I can't restrict my ability to make money on my land, as long as I'm complying with those rules that everybody else is complying against. I don't like the limit of 10 people in 3 cars. There are people like the woman who spoke before me who, hosts have houses available for family reunions. I don't like the requirement that short-term rentals be inspected and have to pass building code, which will prohibit anybody with an older home. I mean, the building codes are very strict. Again, my house will pass fine, it just did, but anybody who has an older home or anybody who is offering an alternative accommodation, such as, like a tree house or whatever that they want to put on their property that people want to come and pay for or to stay at. So I just urge everybody to really look at that issue. Make sure if you do put in regulations that it is going to give you the desire that you want, the end result that you want. And I don't think these regulations do. And I just also question, why are short-term rentals targeted and not long-term rentals? And then just one other little beef I had was the garbage cans. Bringing in garbage cans after 24 hours for short-term rentals, but also bringing in garbage cans after 48 hours for other folks. I don't know if there's a single person in here who hasn't been guilty of that. So that might be a nightmare to enforce. But anyway, thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Rick Werwaste, I live in North Chatham. This way.
Did you spell your last name?
Yep, W-E-R-W-A-I-S-S. I was at the first meeting starting the comprehensive plan and have been involved to varying degrees ever since. And one thing that I tried to keep in mind through this whole process was we haven't changed zoning since 1972. The original zoning, the zoning we took from somewhere on Long Island and tried to retrofit here. Having been through the comprehensive planning process, saw how long it took to get to this point, I want to remind everybody that what we're looking at is probably going to be the zoning in this town for decades. Those are the odds. So a couple of points about that I want to say. So when you talk about the planning board, remember that this document is not for the planning board we have today. It is for all the planning boards going forward for quite a while, in all likelihood. And so those of you who are finding it a little too prescriptive, keep in mind that the town also has, and taxes have come up, has to keep in mind expenses. And having worked on the roads aspect of this, I can tell you that the cost of roads was a very high-level discussion, front-of-mind topic throughout the entire roads discussion. We have routes in this town that were designed for traffic. We have roads, which the town owns, and only one of which, Rock City Road, is really designed for traffic at this point. The rest of them are just designed to get people to their residences or farmers to their properties. That's how they were built originally. That's how they've been maintained ever since. To change them because zoning wasn't prescriptive enough and the planning board 10 years from now said, oh, what the hell, go ahead. Means you're going to have to regrade pave that road, and you're looking at big bills on a road that wasn't designed for that. So that was at the forefront of our minds as we went through a lot of that work. And I just want to if I'm the last speaker, I guess I'm going to leave it on that note. But I just want to respond to questions about the work that was done on roads and the motivations behind it and the outcomes that we were shooting for. And we constantly referenced the comprehensive plan throughout that entire process, and keeping the character and the rural nature and dealing with the cost of running the town were always at the forefront of everybody's minds in those discussions. Thanks.
That's the end of the sign-up list. I want to thank everybody for their comments and their thoughts, and reiterate that if you have any other thoughts that you want to submit to the town board, please do so. I'm going to call the public hearing to close at 7:18. And I'd like a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.